Right, well now here in Essex, if you're into amateur radio, there's only one name that stands out, that of Waters and Stanton, who are based in Hockley. And I'm delighted today to be joined by one half of that august company, Peter Waters, who's possibly better known to other amateur radio enthusiasts as G30JV. So welcome to Phoenix FM, Peter.
Thank you, Scott.
First off, I've got to ask you to explain to those uninitiated amongst us just what ham radio is all about and how you got involved in the first place.
When I got involved in amateur radio, I suppose like a lot of people by accident, I walked into the newsagents at the age of 17 and saw a magazine there called Shortwave Magazine, which was dealing with with radio equipment, and I didn't really know much about it, but it looked interesting, so I bought it. And that's really how I started, by reading a magazine. Amateur radio has been going for many years. In fact, amateur radio is really parallel development of radio itself. When budding amateurs wanted to experiment with transmissions over short distances, and so it paralleled Marconi's work. And today, amateur radio means that you can operate an amateur radio station in your house anywhere in the world, provided that you're allowed to, and that covers most countries. And you set up a small station, you can transmit to guys across the road or across the world, and it's got a very big following.
And how long have you been a licensed operator?
Well, I was licensed in 1960 at the age of 17.
That's just showing off.
Yeah, that's right. 54 years behind the microphone.
Showing off to be able to do it at the age of 17, because in those days it wasn't as easy as it is today.
It was a lot more difficult because you had to, by and large, build your own equipment.
Yeah, indeed. Now, when did you and Jeff Stanton start up the business, and how did you get started?
Well, Jeff and I both worked in the insurance industry, and we actually met up because we ended up in the same company. And Jeff's interest was hi-fi, mine was radio, and we used to go out for a drink at lunchtime and decided that really and truly we'd got as far as we were going to go in the insurance industry. And I always had a hankering to run my own business, and so we talked about it, and that's really how it got off the ground.
And did you start in hi-fi or ham radio or both?
Well, my interest was always been ham radio, but we started really in hi-fi simply because we needed people to come into the shop. So we opened a small shop in Hockley, selling turntables and amplifiers as they were then, and we were doing a bit of advertising, amateur radio in the magazines. And so I was anxious to get the radio side off the ground, and Jeff was anxious to get people in the shop and sell hi-fi to them.
So, going on from that, has the coming of the likes of eBay, Amazon and the other online retailers, especially those in China, forced changes on your business operation now?
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, it's totally different to what it was when we started. The internet has changed radically the way retailing goes, and so you have to go with the stream. And so a lot of our business now is through the internet.
But you still opened a new branch in Scotland. I just wondered if that made sense, bearing in mind, as you say, so much more is done online.
Yes. I mean, the two reasons. First of all, people in Scotland like to buy from somebody that speaks the same language. Although we speak the same language, the accent is totally different. And who knows what's going to happen in the next year, few months. But Scotland's a very big place, and of course people like to handle the equipment and try it out, and that's what you can't do on the internet. So you do need a presence there, so somebody can come in and operate the equipment and have a look at it.
And also talk to somebody face to face, a real person.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Now, taking that a stage further, with the coming of the internet, do you think that there's still a future for ham radio?
Oh yes, I mean ham radio is a communication system by and large, but it's very much a hobby, and it's the fascination of being able to build or put together a radio station and talk to people across the world, people that you'd never otherwise talk to, and know that they've got a common interest, ham radio.
Now, I'm not old enough to remember the years where immediately after the end of the war, the market was awash with all manner of ex-forces equipment. There were walkie-talkies like 38 sets and larger units like 19 sets, which I only found out the other day were manufactured in Southend by Echo.
That's right, absolutely right.
But it obviously was a hobby that many schoolboys could take up by buying a lot of this surplus equipment quite cheaply. But these days, that's no longer the case. The equipment is so much more complex. So how do people get involved at a reasonable cost now?
Well, first of all, I have to say that we've still got 19 sets and 38 sets in our museum at Southend, and who's in Hockley and wants to, we're not too busy, we'll show them our collection of antique radios. Well, basically, you've got to buy something, but there are some cheap routes into it. Obviously, second hand is one way. Joining a local radio club, usually there's some members there that can loan you equipment to get you on the air. So it doesn't have to be an expensive start.
But, of course, before you can actually talk to other amateurs, you're going to have to get a licence, and for that you do have to still take an examination, albeit it isn't as complicated as it was all those years ago. So just how difficult is that, and how much would you need to budget for?
Well, the examination itself, there's three levels. There's the foundation, the intermediate, and the full license. And if you go for the foundation, the foundation license, it's not costly at all. You can actually do the examination in a weekend. I would recommend getting in touch with the local radio club, and if you want to know where your local radio club is, get in touch with the Radio Society of Great Britain, RSGB, Google that. And there's a lot of information up there about the local clubs. But a club is probably the best way to start because they will guide you through the examination, which is not difficult in the initial stages.
You say you could do it in a weekend, but you're not suggesting that you could do the entire course and know the whole thing in 2 days, right?
No, but I think the way that most people go is they start off with their foundation licence, which gets their their feet wet, and they get a feeling for how it all works, and you progress from there.
And what sort of cost of equipment would they need to be looking at in those early days?
Well, thank you, China. We've now got some very cheap radios. You can pick up an FM transmitter for around about £50 or £60, and even less if you go on the second-hand market. But as I say, clubs will help you. They have junk sales, second-hand sales, and so forth. So it doesn't have to be costly, but of course it can run into a lot of money as you progress. And we're not always, of course, talking about youngsters. Amateur radio is very much a middle-aged or older than that hobby. People that have retired and so forth want to keep in touch, want to experiment, want to have some fun.
Now, I know that these days you've got all kinds of equipment that kind of can take the guesswork out of ham radio by linking your equipment into a computer. You can even identify potential contacts where you can see that your signal's being received, even if no one has actually responded, and talk via satellites and talk to the space station and goodness knows what else. But now you really are talking big money, are you not?
Well, you are, but I think that when we talk about computers, almost every household has got a computer, so that part of the expense is probably already taken care of.
But what about the program? You've got to buy the...
Well, yes, but there is a lot of freeware available now. So there's a lot of freeware available, applications for radio amateurs. So even there, it doesn't have to be very costly.
But all of this gadgetry that you now have, doesn't it a little way take the fun or the magic out of the original hobby of just being able to talk to somebody simply on the other side of the world?
Well, yes. There's a very interesting analogy, and that is fishing. Fishing is one of the most popular hobbies. You could go to the local fish shop and buy all the fish you wanted to, or buy tropical fish or whatever, but people still like the challenge of doing it the hard way. And amateur radio is really the challenge of talking to people across the world with very simple, very often quite inexpensive equipment. Some of them build it, but it's just the challenge of getting your signals probably sometimes running very low power, getting those signals across the world and talking to somebody on some remote island, which you probably wouldn't do with your cellular phone because you wouldn't know they were there in the first place.
Right, and you reckon you can do this with, I suppose the aerial's actually probably one of the most important parts, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. The aerial is important, but there again, it doesn't have to be terribly ambitious or complicated. I've got an aerial system which is actually in the attic of my house, so you wouldn't actually know there's anybody there. So it doesn't have to be that ambitious. But you're right, there are some very ambitious aerial systems. If you've got a lot of land and you've got a bit of money, you can put a tower up and goodness knows what.
Probably going to get struck by lightning.
Well, absolutely, yes.
Now, you mentioned earlier on that Waters and Stanton had started just before the high five bubble burst. And in recent years, even the old shortwave listening hobby seems to be dying out more and more because the broadcasters are all switching off their shortwave transmitters and moving over to the internet. So in reality, how long do you see ham radio lasting and indeed shortwave listening lasting? And what do you think Waters and Stanton will be concentrating on in 40 years' time? There's a question for you.
Well, there we are. That covers a lot of things, doesn't it? I think, first of all, one has to remember that technology today relies an awful lot on things like satellites and repeaters, but those could fail. The direct communication from point A to point B with radio is still going to be very, very important. It's still very useful and very, very essential for emergency services. Ham radio itself, I think, will continue because I see no reason why it shouldn't continue. It is a hobby. The ability to build, make and operate some very simple, low-powered equipment and talk to like-minded enthusiasts. And, of course, we have contests. We have a lot of contests in amateur radio, which is a lot of fun. So there's a lot there. We bounce signals off the moon and so forth. And we're still working in parallel with the professionals. There's a lot of fun to be had. And there's a lot of comfort, from elderly people that are involved in amateur radio. Those that are not so mobile, those that may have some ailment, they can sit at home and they can talk to their friends, either across the road, across the town, or across the world. That is amateur radio. But at the same time, there's a lot of technology to explore if you've got that sort of mindset and you want to have some fun with technology.
So you've encouraged me to have a look at this. What should I do? Are there any particular clubs that locally in this area that are worthwhile joining?
Well, yes. I think Brentwood itself has got a radio club. Romford has got a club. There's a couple in the South End area. But as I said at the beginning, that probably if you want to get those contact details, go onto the Radio Society of Great Britain's website. They've got all the list of the clubs there. And if anybody wants to some more information, they can give us a call down in Hockley, and we'll be happy to point them in the right direction.
Is it just as a matter of interest? Do you actually stock any second-hand equipment?
Oh yes, very much so. Yes, we stock a lot of second-hand equipment, and that is really how people upgrade. They bring their old equipment in and trade it in for new equipment, and that's where a lot of people start in the hobby. They buy some second-hand equipment.
Well, look, Peter, thank you very much indeed for coming in today. Really do appreciate that. And I hope that one or two people out there have been encouraged to have a look at amateur radio, because it is a lot of fun. Because I was encouraged by somebody else who came in here and be interviewed, and lo and behold, within a year I had a licence, and then I got the intermediate.
Right.
I haven't gone for the other one yet. I think I'll stick where I am for the time being. Thanks very much indeed for that.
Okay, you're welcome.